Hola, ¿quién está conmigo hoy?
Hola, profe, bienvenido conmigo, con Elizabeth.
Ah, ¿qué tal, Isabel?
¿Cómo le ha ido?
Un poquito mal. Me está pegando eso que le está dando a todo el mundo ahora. El resfriadito ese, tengo la voz afónica.
Ay, profe, así estaba yo en estos días también.
A mí me está dando.
Mal,
Sí,
mal de
sí.
eso. Está dando mucho de eso.
Lo que pasa es que el trabajo sigue, entonces dar una clase con esta cosa es complicado. Es complicado porque uno tiene que hacer un esfuerzo triple.
Sí, profe, tiene toda la razón.
Bueno, esta clase afortunadamente nada más 1 hora.
Sí, profe, ya es la última, me dijeron.
Sí, esta es la última, hasta que me asignen otra más adelante, ¿no? Pero esta es la última.
Ah, bueno, profe, pues esperemos entonces a ver si alguien se conecta.
Bueno, solamente un muchacho se ha estado conectando en las últimas semanas. Vamos a esperar ahí hasta como las 9, hasta como las 10:10. A ver, si no se presenta, entonces arrancamos. Yo arranco y leo y pongo como 2 videos ahí, entonces ya ahí terminamos.
Listo, profe. Así
Ok.
será.
Dale, Elizabeth, pues, iniciemos.
Listo, profe. Muy buenos días a todos. Les doy la cordial bienvenida a la última clase de literatura infantil. Para recordarles hacer el llenado de la valoración estudiantil que va a estar habilitado 7 días posteriores al día de hoy y cuenta un 5% de la nota. Y para compartirles los parámetros de las secciones por videoconferencia. Las secciones de Gran pueden verlas nuevamente en la plataforma virtual. Les solicitamos que por favor silencien sus micrófonos y puedan activarlos cuando quieran hacer consultas o aportes con el permiso del docente. Le pedimos que mantenga su cámara activa. De no poder hacerlo, enviar su excusa por el chat de Zoom. De lo contrario, será retirada la sección y le serán restados puntos en la valoración del docente. Mi rol como moderador es facilitar y apoyar en la parte técnica. Consultas por el chat personal o general. Les exhorto a tener bolígrafo y papel para hacer sus anotaciones y aprovechar al máximo esta sección que tiene una oración de 2 horas. Bienvenido.
Okay, hello kids, once more. This is the final class, part 2 of the module number 5. It's only should be 1 hour, but there's no students. There are no students here with me today, so probably would be a little shorter than that. For module 5, I have found a video, a very interesting one, that if you pay attention to it, you will get a good idea of the importance of children videos in our modern day society. Let me try and put that on for you now. I think it's another one I have around here. Should be a complimentary video of the one you're going to see, and that should finalize our lesson, our part 2 lesson for today. So this give me a moment. Let me try and find this for you. Let's see, somewhere around here. Okay, it's here. Let's bring it on for you now. One moment. Okay, here we go.
In my experience, there is a bit of a problem for English departments to accept that children's literature should be treated, if you like, with equal status, equal resources, as English literature or literatures in English, however that's put. Education departments have a place for it, but the problem with education departments is that they are, and have been for the last 20 years, in one form or another at war with government requirements, and literature is sliding around. Literature is sliding around because it's subsumed under something called literacy. We used to keep these two words separate. We had the notion that literacy was the acquisition of the ability to read and write, and then over here was some stuff that was to do with feelings or to do with ideas that were expressed through feelings and creatures and imaginary beings. That was understood, these two things were sort of slightly separate. What happened in 1988, when the National Literacy Strategy came in, was that there was this word literacy that gobbled up literature, which has not been to the benefit of literature, I would argue. That ultimately it's been to its detriment, because what happens is that you can very easily get into conversations with anybody involved in the education world, and they say, oh, this poem is very good for literacy. And you're going, well, actually, I quite hoped it would just sort of like make people feel happy. And they think, well, what's the point of that? And you're thinking, well, isn't that been the point of literature for the last 5,000 years? Is sometimes to make people happy, sometimes sad, sometimes scared. You know, isn't that? And it's kind of slipped away. So when literature degrees and the study of literature is under the auspices of education, then it's quite interesting because it joins the battle. Now, I'm, as you might guess, quite happy about that. But you do have to say that, whereas within the literature world, its battle is different because it's saying, hello, we're as significant as Hamlet. But in a way, I don't think children's literature should have to say we are as significant as Hamlet. It should just have the right to exist and the study of it for whatever pans out, and we can expand on that. So that's my experience within academia. I'll just say one other thing, and it's a bit of an anecdote, and I'm going to try and find a way of saying it discreetly so nobody is libelled. Okay, so I supervised somebody who wrote a dissertation, an MA dissertation on Harry Potter, and I thought that it was absolutely stunning. I thought it was absolutely brilliant because he brought to bear some modern critical literary theory and illuminated certain things about the Harry Potter whole range, the whole lot, all the novels, and just the novels, not the films. And he really examined it, and I thought he exposed and showed various things. I gave it, Mark's terms, an easy distinction. Now, normally what happens within universities is that you then have a second marker, and you then chat away, you come to an agreement, and then a mark is given. That didn't happen. Okay, and the dissertation, I found out through phone calls, was given a mark well below that. Yes, and when I asked why, they said, well, there wasn't time to get in touch with you. And then when I investigated a bit further, I found out that the reason why the mark was given way below it, and this is the significant bit, was because the writer of the dissertation had not dealt with the intrinsic conservatism of children's literature. Okay? Now, nothing to do with the Tory party, let's just be clear about this.
Though now that you mention it.
Yes, though what the person was referring to was the fact that as far as the adult world of literature is concerned, is that you can do anything you want. You can write like Kafka, you can write like B.S. Johnson and shuffle pages, you can write like Apollinaire, you can do what you want. But the children's literature is confined by certain unwritten rules, one of which is that there is a kind of conservation of emotion that takes place by the end. In other words, some kind of redemption, some kind of metaphorical or actual coming home, some kind of restoration takes place on the last, depending whether it's a picture book or a novel or whatever, in the last chunk, post-denouement of 99% of children's books. Not all of them, but most of them. And so this writer of the dissertation was accused of not having dealt with that, whereas I, if you like, had marked it from within that assumption. Yes, that's what children's literature does. I wasn't expecting necessarily somebody to say, and another thing, this Harry Potter, there is a conservation that takes place, there is a form in which order is resumed, and there isn't an ultimate subversive outcome. I didn't expect him to do that. I expected him to analyse the stuff in an interesting and new and original way. So there you get an example from within the children's book critical world within academe of how there is a division, and if you like, how children's literature is in a sense trivialised, because that is at the heart of the problem. And I'll just finish on this, is that it is very easy, I won't necessarily say that it's culturally universal, but to trivialise children and childhood. And this is ironic because at the very time that we do it, culturally speaking, that there is a huge, I won't call it an industry, but a huge interest in psychoanalysis and how we have the child within us and that we never leave the child behind and that the child is talking. So on the one hand, we individually take our childhoods seriously, but in culturally speaking, there is a tendency to trivialise it. If you just take the kind of classic taxi cab encounter, is that you get in, you say, what do you do? I write children's books, or they've seen me on the telly or something like that, and they go, oh yeah, I love kids, yeah, they're great. And you go, yeah, and they love jokes, don't they? And you go, yeah, they do love jokes. And
unlike adults, of course.
That's right. And there's an immediate sense that, because they're smaller, that their brains are smaller and that sort of everything is smaller about them. And so there's some bit of a kind of strange tension between trivialising children but not our own individual childhoods, which are taken very seriously, and so on, and that then spills into children's books, and then even up there in these in the ivory tower, if you like, say within English departments, there is a sort of sense that, well, you can't really take children's literature seriously because it's conservative. So bam, this chap didn't get a distinction. Sorry, that's the, yeah.
Isn't,
You can tell I'm still bitter, aren't I? Can you see that? It's still riling me, yeah.
I'll get over it, it's fine.
No, I won't.
There are sort of two arguments. You could argue in either direction from that talking about children's literature within the context of an English department, as it were, as a module of something else, it means that it's going to be bound by frameworks that are unsuitable. It means that it's going to be in a conversation with people who don't really know what they're talking about. But it also presumably is one of the ways of making people value it. So you don't put Philip Pullman over there. You put Philip Pullman on the same course where you're talking about Milton and where you're talking about whatever it is. And it may be that one of the conversations to have is whether, in a sense, the more we actually isolate this as a subject, the more we're making it easy to keep it away from whatever is the mainstream. This is, I think, is true in terms of criticism as well as in terms of academic study.
Well, that's the kind of with it or separatist argument, isn't it? If you take the equivalent within, say, African American studies, one of the statements that has been made by, say, African Americans in America in particular was, well, we need to be separate in order to establish a body of critical theory. We need to have confidence in each other, and we know who we are before we dissipate, in case we dissipate ourselves and find that we're constantly trying to have arguments with people on the wrong bit. So one of the arguments about children's literature people getting in a huddle and talking to each other is in order to kind of raise the critical level that you have the conversation without having to constantly justify yourselves. So,
but it is happening somewhere else. I mean, I think one thing which is obvious is there is a lot of criticism. There are a lot of reviews of children's books. There are probably more than ever, but they're happening on children's books blogs. They're happening in children's book sites. They're happening in rooms full of people who are interested in children's books, rather than in the pages of newspapers surrounded by lots of other conversations.
Yes, and one of the problems with that is that there is quite a big divergence between the way children's books are talked about, and I don't mean this in any dismissive way at all, within the popular media, right, and the way in which it's being taught about in academe. So to take one example, one of the key issues in academe is, if you like, the whole area of what is it that children respond with when they read children's books. What is their psychosocial apparatus? What is it? Because when we read as adults and we're reading books, we know what it is. It's our vast personal and social experience. And then we go, but these small human beings, they haven't got that. It's all smaller. Yes, they're smaller, their brains are smaller, their experience is smaller. That's, I'm trivializing it deliberately. Okay, so when within the children's book critical world in academe, you have to assault that, you have to deal with that, you have to say, well, what is the nature of children's experience when they're 3 years old, when they're 5 years old, when they're 7-year-olds? What are they responding with? And so you do come up against post-structuralist theory, you come up against a notion like intertextuality, and you say, well, what is a 5-year-old's intertextual existence? What has it been? What are the rhymes and the riddles and the telly? What are the things that they've heard? What are the nature of their verbal experience? Because that's what they are responding with. At the same time, you might have to take on board, well, when Freud was talking about 0 to 5, it was like historical. But when we're talking about entertaining 0 to 5-year-olds, if Freud was in any way right, they're right in the middle of it. So when you have a book like Where the Wild Things Are, which came out of psychoanalysis, was he addressing something that children are addressing at the very moment of their life? It's not a historical thing. It was for Sendak, because he was lying on the couch talking about it. And then he, in a sense, externalized it and put it into a book. But the child, if even just half of Freud, quarter of Freud is anyway right, that's what they're going through. So that's an issue. And then again, if you say, well, every text that we ever come across has what has been called in the jargon, it's an implied reader. That's to say, we inscribe the reader into what we write. If I put up a notice, do not smoke, or no smoking, that inscribes into the text a certain notion of who's reading it. Well, that applies to children's books. If I say, once upon a time there was a, right, then I inscribe a notion of the reader. So how does that come about? So all these are kind of part of the critical language within academia, but then I open the paper and I read stuff about children's books, and it sort of hardly ever addresses it. They don't have to, and there's no reason why they should. But if you're going to be sort of spending some time thinking in detail, you know, week to week across a year or 2 years, I can see one of my students right here now, poor sod, that's what you're going to engage with. You're going to engage with what people have said about childhood and about texts that appeal to children in that way. So in a funny sort of way, I can see the interest that you're saying and on blogs and so on, but there's quite a divergence. We're not fully talking to each other at the moment.
Is what happened then that we have children's books reviewed in, for example, The Guardian, and essentially they're being reviewed in the same way adult books are being reviewed, which means they're not being talked about in terms of anything that the Academy would recognise or value necessarily, but they're being assessed as products that are being made for readers, if you like. But there's always a slight complication because the people who are talking about these books are not the readers, are not the intended readers. And this may be an issue with a lot of the way we talk about children's books, that we're going on a bear hunt, has sold 175 zillion copies, but it's never been bought by a 2-year-old. It's being bought by, and it's being produced by, and published by, and written by. All of these books have someone else not only assessing, evaluating them, but also at every stage of the production, someone who is not part of that 2-year-old reaction or the 3-year-old reaction.
That's the particular, as it were, issue around children's books, but then people struggle with this as to whether that's something that is particular to the production of children's books, that somehow or other the makers of them are separated culturally from the readers of them. But you could argue, I'm sure people here, you could put up an argument that it's sort of the nature of almost all publishing, that most publishing comes out of a particular kind of outlook, a particular kind of ghetto, a particular kind of educational background, but not necessarily the readers belong to that. There are always separations between the producers and the readers. I mean, that's one thought in that respect. I mean, the other that often strikes me is that when we talk about children's literature and children's books, merely by that nomenclature, we're saying the books are for children. Actually, I don't think they are, right? I actually think that what we have done by inventing children's books, which this country in particular had a key role to play in doing that, is that there are two big conversations that go on that probably most people in this room have been involved with in some way or another, particularly if we're parents, particularly if we're teachers, but that is a conversation and institutions take place that we could broadly lump as education, pedagogy, and the other one is nurture. So we nurture our children, we feed them, we bring them up, we care for them, all the rest of it, and we sometimes intend to educate them. And there are meta conversations about this, the conversation about nurture and the conversation about education. They go on. My own feeling is that that's what children's books are. They are part of the conversations that we have about education and nurture. What distinguishes them from Penelope Leach or Sir Ken Robinson is that children are included. So when Penny Leach writes about how to bring your children up, children are not supposed to read those because they might find out some tricks that you get up to, right? And in a funny sort of way, the same thing as with Sir Ken Robinson. He says, you know, let's be creative for children, but it's not, the nature of the discourse, the nature of the dialogue he's having is with adults, not with children, yeah? Now go back to, if you like, the 17th and 18th century. People invent these things for, by and large, these middle-class children, while there is a street literature going on at the same time for the non-middle classes, that a lot of this stuff, in actual fact, engages with how adults relate to children. But it's a conversation that's had with children. Let's go back to where the wild things are. You can look at it and say this is about the rage and anger inside a little boy, and that he's really furious, and then he deals with his demons, and then he comes back home. But actually, if you think about the book in its entirety, the boy is suspended within a sanction given by an invisible parent, his mother. His mother has sent him to his room because he said, I'll eat you up. Who did he say I'll eat you up to? His mother. His anger is with his mother. And then he's punished, he's separated. There's a classic case of detachment. His mother forcibly detaches him. So it enters the whole argument, you know, the argument about detachment and attachment, which has, you know, run through psychology and psychotherapy for the last however many years, right? He is detached. In his state of detachment, he finds something, and then there is, restoration, conservatism at the end. He has his meal waiting for him, a hot meal. Where did he get that from? At one level you could say from anywhere, but the chances are, okay, it's from the person who punished him, who he said, I would eat you up. In fact, he's going to eat something else up, not his mother, but the food. So there's a whole dialogue in that book that is not usually stated, that is in actual fact precisely about nurture and to a certain extent about education. The boy is somehow or other educated by the experience. So if I take that as a kind of prototype, and you can go through, you know, you can name any author you like, and look at it through those prisms, then I would say, well, that's actually why children's literature is serious, because it's engaging with that argument about nurture and education, but including children in it, which makes it, that's what distinguishes it from Penny Leach and Sir Ken Robinson, both of whom I've enjoyed reading, by the way. But, you know, so that's how I would put that.
That's a very interesting book that you saw. It's very interesting because it puts the point of view of children's books not given the importance that it should be given. The views about children's books have changed. I think the guy that was speaking, he said from 1988, the views have changed a bit. And for me, children's literature is very important for when the child is growing up. Remember, kids at such young ages, they're like a sponge that absorbs all information that you give to them. You know, it's critical for them, I will say. If I have a different point of view, you know, on what other people's thinkings are, maybe you may have a different point of view also, or probably you will agree with me. I'll present for you now a short video. This wasn't a video that I allowed it to play, the length of it, because information that was given is interesting. You should play it back again. That's why I didn't interrupt the video. You should play it back again and look at it in its entirety, his entire length, and make your own conclusions from there. But you could contrast that video with what I'm going to play for you now, which I think is it's very important. And I was looking at it a couple times, and really I think children literature should go on and exist and not be taken away its importance. Let me try and play this for you. Let's see.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Storytime family. How are you today? Have you been reading lots? I hope you have. Well, today we have a very special book called Be Kind by Pat Zitlow Miller. What does being kind mean to you? Does being kind mean helping someone out when they need it? Or being kind can be being generous to your brother or your sister, sharing and caring for them, and just by being gentle and also being considerate. Well, let's find out what being kind means in this book and in the story. Be kind. Tanisha spilled grape juice yesterday. All over her new dress. Everyone laughed I almost did too, but Mom always tells me to be kind, so I tried. I don't think it worked, I said. Purple is my favorite color. I thought Tanisha would smile, but she ran into the hall instead. When she came back, snack time was over. She put on her art smock and didn't look at anyone. I almost told Tanisha that art was my favorite class, but I didn't want her to leave again. So I painted purple splotches and added some green until I had a bunch of beautiful violets. While I painted, I thought about Tanisha. Should I have handed her my napkin? Let her borrow my sweatshirt? Spilled my juice so everyone stared at me instead? What does it mean to be kind anyway? What does it mean to be kind to you? Or what does it mean for someone to be kind to you? Maybe it's giving, making cookies for Mr. Rinaldi who lives alone, letting someone with smaller feet have my too tight shoes. He might win races in them too. Maybe it's helping, putting dirty dishes in the sink, like helping out mommy clean up after yourself, picking up your laundry, making your bed, cleaning up after Otis, our class guinea pig. He's a messy eater. Maybe it's paying attention, telling Desmond I like his blue boots, asking the new girl to be my partner, listening to Aunt Franny's stories, even the ones I've heard before. Being kind could also be saying nice things about someone, complimenting someone, telling your mom that she looks so pretty today, picking her flowers. Being kind should be easy, like throwing away a wrapper or recycling a bottle, or saying, thank you, bless you. My mom says the quickest way to be kind is to use people's names. Hey Kayla, what's new, Omar? Good afternoon, Rabbi Mandelbook. Being kind can be hard too. Even when you know what to do, teaching someone something I'm good at is tricky, even when I'm patient. Being kind could be also sharing with your siblings and sticking up for someone when other kids aren't kind is really hard and really scary. Maybe I can't solve Tanisha's grape juice problem. Maybe all I can do is sit by her in art class and paint this picture for her because I know she likes purple too. Maybe I can only do small things, but my small things might join small things other people do. And together they could grow into something big. Remember, kids, small things can make a big difference too. Something really big, so big that our kindness spilled out of our school, spread throughout town, travel across the country, and go all the way around the world. Wouldn't that be the best thing? If everyone is kind, the whole world would be a big bubble of kindness. Wouldn't that be cool? Right back to Tanisha and me, so we can be kind again and again. And again. Now, I told you that was a very special story, don't you think? So what does being kind mean to you? Leave us a comment and let us know. Hope you enjoyed the story. Come back and see us again and click on the notification bell for the next video. Thanks so much for dropping by. Take care now. Bye-bye.
So you saw a very interesting, a very interesting video. Being kind is what the video says. I think that's a wonderful video. When you see things like that, I cannot like fully agree with other people, regardless of what years of experience they may have. But I agree that children position having their own literature is unique. It's very important for them in the growing up process. Like this video, this is like a masterpiece video, you know. But each person have their own way of seeing things. So I will leave you for on this reflection. Look at the other video again. Watch this one that I just presented to you about kids, and come up with your own decision, with your own point of view. So with this, we officially end the course of children literature. Hope this have been useful to you. And until we meet again, well, so long. Take care. God bless. Goodbye, students. Elizabeth?
Profe,
Ya concluimos, ya di la despedida a los muchachos. Ya este es el último curso hasta que me llamen de nuevo. Así que hasta que sea ese día, entonces fue un placer trabajar con usted. Dios le bendiga y nos vemos más adelante.
profe, lo mismo a usted, que Dios lo bendiga también. Muchísimas gracias. La sección se da por finalizada y a los estudiantes recuerden hacer el llenado de la valoración estudiantil. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Profe, gracias.